Now, in this section, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about the impact of porn. We're going to talk about privacy. But I think one of the biggest issues in our society today, which is not talked about a lot, is the impact of porn, in particular as it relates to kids. Pornography might be this generation's cigarettes. In the past, we didn't really know how bad cigarettes were for, generations in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, we began to kind of figure things out. And I think that's kind of where we are with pornography today. The average age that a child first sees pornography, right, in this generation is age 11. And just think of the amount of hormones that kids are beginning to flow through a child's bloodstream, right, at that age, 11, 12, 13 years old. And now they have literally total access to every sex act known to man, and frankly, some sex acts not known to man. Where would we have been at that age if we had access to that? What would our views about sexuality and relationships and marriage and family be like? So that's what we're dealing with today. Hey, you can take morality, put it off to the side. I don't think you can, but you can try that. But what pornography can do to a young man or young woman's mind can very well upset what today we call an American family, a good, healthy American family. So, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I had two priests within probably a month or so of one another come up to me. They had been in my presentations, and they both basically said the same thing. When I hear a young man's voice in the confessional, I know the first sin he confesses will involve watching porn. And the second priest actually came up to me and said, and for the very first time, I'm beginning to hear more and more young ladies confess that they're watching porn. Does that surprise me? Absolutely not. Because if they've got a device and the parent is not watching that device, particularly when they're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, that's going to happen. That's almost just natural curiosity. But when you're trying to figure out who you are and you're curious and you're filled with hormones, right, it's difficult not to necessarily look at pornography. But what can pornography do to our brains? So in my most recent book, Social Media and the Adolescent Digital Tribe, Navigating the Teen World State, we talk a little bit about that. But my biggest concern with this current adolescent digital tribe is their access to pornography when they're not looking for it. Because algorithms produced by app owners and those owners of websites that produce this type of material can actually slowly push that out into their devices. But more importantly, just imagine the first time we bring our kids home, right, from the hospital. You sit them on the couch, and what's on television? It is hard, even at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, right, not to see some images which past generations would have looked at, not necessarily as pornographic, but they would have looked at it as being highly sexualized. So from the time that a child's eyes are open and they can look at all these flashing screens we have in our home, they're being pretty much indoctrinated to this type of view of sexuality. Nothing wrong with sexuality. It's how it's really presented. Most kids today get their news from the internet. A lot of times it might be through news feeds that you can find on YouTube. It could be in some cases from Flipboard, but oftentimes it's from Snapchat and it's from Instagram. And that's fine. But it's really difficult because of algorithms and how the information is often pushed out to us to really get a balanced perspective, right? And when it comes to culture and society, that is absolutely true, because we are getting, if you fall into a particular demographic, you're going to be getting information from those app developers, from those media moguls, that they're going to send this out to an individual that they think they're going to be able to change the attitudes and minds of. So Dr. Epstein I believe she's over in London. Back in the 80s and 90s, I think she first came out with Epstein's overlapping spheres of influence, where you have the school, the child, the community, and the family, but the child is right there in the middle. If you were to look at this today, there's one component that's missing, and that is media and social media. Media and social media kind of envelopes all of those, right? And in fact, I would say in some cases, it's stronger than family. Some cases, it's stronger than the community, and church would probably fall under community there as well. And oftentimes, it's much stronger than school. So these are some things that we really historically have never really had to deal with, right? Social media has just been here for about the last 20 or so years. Media has been here forever, but both of them are ubiquitous now, right? You cannot go anywhere without having social media and media, right? Because they're on our devices, we're addicted to those devices, particularly young people, and we cannot take our eyes off of the notifications, the news feeds, and so on and so forth. So Fight the New Drug produced some statistics about pornography and porn sites in particular. And we won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's kind of interesting to look that in 2017, Pornhub got 28.5 billion visits, right? And in 2018, they had almost 110 billion. And as they say here, that's almost 14 videos watched for every person on Earth. And then they had almost 630,000 hours of content consumed in 1 year. Now look, the majority of the people that are on these sites are adults. But if adults are that focused on pornography, you can imagine the attraction that it is for kids. Now who's responsible for this? We are. As adults, we're responsible to help manage that, right? You have a young man or young woman is eating too much sugar. A good mom and dad's going to make sure that they're not eating so much sugar, right? You want them to have a good, balanced meal. And oftentimes when it comes to the consumption of material on the internet, kids are not getting a good, balanced meal for their brain. They're not getting the guidance that they need. The same is true in music. I like all forms of music. I really do. I like classical music. I like rock music. Hip-hop, not so much. And the reason for that is the lyrics, oftentimes the lyrics in hip-hop are misogynistic, violent, and pornographic. Now, if you grow up in a culture where you're exposed to that, what is your attitude, particularly if you're a young man, what's your attitude towards women? If you're a young woman, what's your attitude about your own body and relationships that you're going to have in the future? And music can drive some of that. So the following content, as we say here, might be a little offensive. And in every case where this comes up, I always try to clean up the images so that they're not going to totally be too offensive. So the top 8 apps we mentioned before. And remember number 1. Number 1 was YouTube. 2, Netflix. 3, Instagram. And Snapchat. And then you have Twitter. But remember, the top app was YouTube. And look at the content that is available on YouTube. That your child, if you're not managing that, your student, if the schools aren't managing that, how to make a bomb. What about oral sex? Anal sex. And every type of sex act you can possibly imagine is right there on YouTube. Now remember number 2, Netflix. Remember that. And then 61% of Netflix original material that they produced is mature content. 61%. That's the stuff that they're producing. How much of what they're producing is for families? The answer to that, last year anyway, was 1%. So in the survey that we did, we mentioned we did 26 questions for ages 13 to 18, 2,500 students in Southwest Ohio, Northern Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana. In your opinion, how prevalent is the viewing of porn among your peers? Yes or somewhat, 89%. No, it's not, 7%. I don't know, 4%. Now listen, I totally understand. This is not done really scientifically. But it gives you a snapshot. It gives you a snapshot of the attitudes that kids have. Now, it's written from "in your opinion," right? It doesn't say, as a matter of fact, how prevalent is the viewing of porn? In your opinion, how prevalent is the viewing of porn among your peer group? And so at least the impression is that 89% of their peer group is involved in pornography. And the old saying, hey, there's an app for that, right? There's an app for learning how to sew. There's an app for learning how to make better steaks. There's an app for just about everything. And the same is true when you're talking about pornography. This is how easy it is to access pornography. So, for example, we've talked about TikTok. Well, YouPorn's new site looks exactly like TikTok, as it says here, but it's porn. Now, it's not really an app, as they suggest. It's a website. But when you click the link to that website, it looks and functions exactly like TikTok. Now remember, TikTok is all produced by individuals, right? The consumer. The consumer is actually the producer of content on TikTok. The exact same thing is true with YouPorn. It looks exactly like it, only it's all pornographic, produced by maybe the guy next door. Augmented reality porn stars are coming to a living room near you. So I always say this in my live presentations, most of the more popular porn stars out there are actually having their entire bodies digitized so they can be used in video games and other things in the future. And this is kind of an example which we're going to show you. So, why teenagers' obsession with porn is creating a generation of 20-year-old virgins? That's the question. Well, first off, let me say, there's nothing wrong with a 20-year-old virgin. However, what this article looks at is why are these young men, in this particular case, virgins at age 20? Maybe in some cases it's because of morality, religious reasons, but in this case the article really focuses on they've been viewing so much pornography from maybe age 11 or 12 years of age, they cannot be sexually stimulated by a real live human being. And in talking to many of the psychologists that I've spoken with, in fact, I'm going to be talking to some later on this week about that issue, many of the folks that come into their office that are having issues with sexuality is a result of viewing porn for as many years as they have. Now let's move on to privacy. This affects everybody. You got a device in your pocket and it's turned on, your privacy is likely being invaded. So this man says he's stockpiling billions of our photos. And in fact, he is, or I should say he was. So as he says, every photo that's ever been placed on social media has been scraped from servers and might now reside in a growing facial recognition database that is 99.6% accurate. Now that was true. So this company was actually going out and scraping the internet of every photograph that was on a web server and could associate a name with it and putting it into a facial recognition database. So what if my picture was on one of those servers? Well, if you've got a picture and you put it on social media, and if that picture was on your profile page of your social media, I guarantee you he has your picture. Now, if it was on a private page, in theory, he wasn't able to kind of get behind that wall and access any of those photographs. But if your profile picture, your son, your daughter, your student athlete's picture is on the profile page of the web app that they're using, their picture is on a server and it's already been accessed into and placed into this facial recognition database that was being sold to law enforcement agencies.
Billions of images from millions of different websites all across the open internet.
This is what Clearview AI's database would look like to law enforcement, says founder Wonton Tat, if, for example, they were searching for me.
I mean, I've got to say, it's slightly unnerving seeing someone able to scroll through so many images of my face.
But you have to remember that This is only used for investigations after the fact. This is not a 24/7 surveillance system.
Tontat says his artificial intelligence program can identify someone from an image in seconds. It matches faces of unknown people to their online photos and the sites the images originally came from. The results, he says, are 99.6% accurate.
Now he goes on to say that no one will ever access this except for some of the law departments, law enforcement organizations that are his clients. Well, that blew up in his face, not more than probably 2 weeks after CBS did that report. And here it is. Clearview AI, which is the company we're talking about, has billions of our photos, but its entire client list was just stolen. And this is one of the reasons I have great concerns about privacy. I don't know about you, but I've had my credit card information stolen 3 times, and one of which, a database of a company that my wife and I were paying to maintain that credit and that privacy, its servers got hacked. So we have to really understand that everything is hackable. Government agencies are hacked a lot, right? Energy companies are hacked, and in fact they're trying to be hacked on an almost daily basis. So to think that our images that are taken by a company like Clearview AI could never be hacked, that's a fallacy, and it's very naive. It's one thing for me. It's quite another thing for my children, my grandchildren. The same is true for you. So if you can't see my face, can you find me? Well, the reality is sometimes if you know what you're doing and you've got the right equipment, the answer to that is, yeah, you can. So for example, this is a picture that actually went viral. So I'm going to do a reverse image search of a photograph that's on my computer that I found on Reddit. And it was a picture of a young lady. Couldn't see her face. But look what happens. When I go through the reverse image search, I almost find 14 million links to that young lady's picture. And this is what else I found. I got her name, I got her address, I got her telephone number, and various other email addresses, and her social media accounts, and the college that she attended. Now, when she was probably at some party and that picture was taken and it was circulated, she never thought for a moment that somebody living in southwestern Ohio would be able to find it, much less almost 14 million other people. So the future of high-tech bullying really has to do with deepfakes. So in this particular movie, you're going to see, we look at the original actors, and then on the right are the new actors. The original actor, and then the new actors. And you can see this is quite a benign example where you just take a classic film and you take more contemporary actors and you replace their faces and how real it looks. But what you're really beginning to see, and my greatest fear when it comes to middle school and high school, is that you're going to have some high school child's face or middle school child's face placed in a popular pornographic video. Right? And imagine the humiliation, particularly as these become more and more sophisticated. What you're seeing right now is very sophisticated use of it, but it can be done for $25, $50 somewhere about that. You can find people online that are willing to do this for you. The software, actually, you can download the software and do it yourself if you got a little bit of time to learn. But this is the future of bullying. You'll see it a lot in the presidential campaigns. You're already seeing it to a certain extent. Katy Perry, there are literally millions of videos circulating of Katy Perry out there. To my knowledge, she's never been in a pornographic movie, but if you go online, you'll find many pornographic movies that have Katy Perry's face. So, and it's because of the thousands of images that are out there that are stored in the cloud. Sometimes they're stored on people's phones, right, of us. We've taken millions of pictures of our children and our grandchildren, a lot of selfies of ourselves. If people just have access to one, preferably about 3 different photographs, that can happen to you. It can happen to your son, your daughter, your students, and so on and so forth. And now you also have this issue of all the personal data that Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat take from us. Now understand, Instagram's owned by Facebook, so the business model is very similar. Some of it is not necessarily relevant to children, But things like location and name, the school that they attend, those types of things, the house that they, where they live, because you can kind of determine the cars that their parents drive, that all says something about the demographics, where they live, their ability to buy things and what have you. So you have that, and you have the child's face, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. So I usually talk about, when I go into schools, I talk about the law of prominence. If you're number one, someone wants to make you two. And if you're using social media, it's made it very easy to do. And so you have these two colossal issues. You've got the one issue of all the data and metadata of a young man or young woman, right? And then you got you got their pictures, their face, which in fact is actually data. So you get the metadata and the picture of their face comes together. That's a powerful, powerful recipe to determine who they are, what they are, right? And can be used for them, and it can be used against them. So your son is popular. He won a scholarship. He has a girlfriend. He uses public Wi-Fi. As I say here, can someone access his photos and other data without touching his phone? The answer is yes, and let me be clear. I'm not saying that every child's data, all their images, right, all their videos, all their text messages are going to be hacked. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is it can be done, and it's relatively easy to do. It is possible that someone is sitting outside of a coffee shop or a restaurant with what's called a pineapple device. And that pineapple device can actually create what looks like a Wi-Fi network, we'll say it's Starbucks, or it might look like Panera. So you go looking for your Wi-Fi network, and maybe you're at Panera Bread, and you go, oh, there's Panera, and you click Panera. Well, it could be that somebody is using a pineapple or a similar device, a very small device, a little bit larger than a smartphone, right? They could be using that. And if you're closer to that device and you click into that, it makes it very easy for that individual that's using that pineapple or other similar device to access your photographs, or your son's photographs, your daughter's photographs, all their text messages, and all the communication that they have stored on that device, right? And there's one very easy way to get around that. There are various ways to get around it, but one of the easiest ways to get around it is using a VPN.
My data's safe enough when I use public Wi-Fi, right? Wrong. Why? Because when using public Wi-Fi, your data travels over a big pipe shared with everyone else. Your pictures, your text messages, all are available to those with the proper gear. But what if you could live your life anonymously, away from hackers and leering eyes? How? Remember that pipe with everyone's data? Imagine that you have your own personal pipe inside that bigger pipe that's running everyone else's data. Now no one can see your digital life. This is a VPN. It hides your data, giving you complete protection from those leering eyes.
So a VPN, as good as they are, they do cause some problems, particularly if you are using parental control devices. There are certain things you have to kind of do to the parental control device depending on the one you're using, and frankly, it can become a headache. But I really suggest, particularly when you're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds on up, that you make sure that they are using a VPN, both on their laptops, their desktops, their tablets, and on their smartphones. And there are a lot of companies that are offering this service. I don't know that I'd pay more than $4.95 per month. Sometimes you can pay $4.95 per month, $9.95 a month, and be able to protect a multitude of devices. But really consider using a VPN, particularly as your children get a little older and you don't have the lockdown so much on them when it comes to using the parental controls. So here's Chief. Chief is our oldest granddaughter's dog, and we were babysitting Chief about 6 months ago. Now I'm showing you this because I want you to understand what's really behind that photograph. When I show this to kids, they look at, oh, it's a cute puppy, and it is. But behind that is a lot of metadata that gives information about where you were when you took that photograph. Now, I was in my side yard when I took this photograph. So this is what we're going to do. I have that photograph stored on my computer. And essentially what I do is I go in, take that photograph off the computer, go to pick2map.com, place that photograph into pick2map.com, and it takes you exactly to where I live. And then you go a step further and you put that into Google Maps, right, and go down to Street View, and it takes you directly to my house. How can you avoid that? How can you avoid your daughter, your son, taking a photograph, sending it to somebody, and then they use that photograph against them, right? Because behind that photograph, every photograph you take with your device is that metadata, unless you turn off location services on that phone, or I should say, on the phone, specifically for your camera. And it's very easy to do. So on an iPhone, you just open up Settings, go down to Privacy, click Privacy, go up to Location Services, and it will list every app that wants access to your location services. And what we do here, we just go up and we find Camera, we click Camera, and now every time you take a photograph on that phone, right, that metadata, the location of where you were at the time, will be turned off. Because here's the thing you have to be concerned with. Your son or daughter are in a relationship, they send a photograph. It could be a nice, just any photograph. They send that photograph to somebody. It's of them. And then they break up 2 months later. Now the person that has that photograph's mad. He or she sends that photograph out to many other people. And now everybody that's received that has access to who that person is and where they live, or at least where they were when they took that photograph. And remember what I said earlier, if your son or daughter are sending inappropriate images, the majority of inappropriate images take place at your house. Can anyone see what I post? Well, the answer to that is, if you you got the right tools, anybody can see what you post. So for here example, this is a typical social listening technology. And what we just did there, that rectangle is a geofence. And we're going to search everybody that's in that geofence. And we can do it just by the geofence itself, or we can do it by using things like the area, the word, username, what have you. And we click search, and all these icons will appear. And in this particular case, we can tap on any of those icons, and we'll get directly into that user's account. Particularly if it's not locked down as private. If it's private, we'll be able to see their profile page. If it's not, you'll be able to see everything that they've ever done, or almost everything that they've ever done. So it's used sometimes by the CIA, the FBI might use that type of technology, but it can be used for you, it can be used against you. It's one thing to be used by law enforcement for good purposes, quite another to be used for more nefarious purposes.